What if God cared less about your rituals than your actions? What happens when humanity dares to challenge the divine and wins? The answer will change how you see faith forever. Let's find out.
What is the truth about the eternal covenant, decoding the foundations of faith? For millennia, millions have believed in a strict creator demanding absolute obedience. But what if the foundation of this religion hides a rebellious secret?
The truth is a story not of passive submission, but of radical transformation and sacred defiance. The earliest roots of this ancient tradition conceal an evolutionary leap that forever altered humanity's relationship with the divine.
What did the original covenant actually look like for early, vulnerable desert nomads? Did they worship the same universal God we recognize today? Or was their spiritual world vastly different?
Before this covenant, ancient people constantly sought to appease unpredictable, terrifying nature gods. The Abrahamic covenant revolutionized religion by offering a deeply personal promise, an agreement based on inheriting land and securing a lineage, rather than mere survival. How was this personal, familial promise transformed into a rigid national constitution? What event could possibly bind a fractured group of freed slaves into a unified people under a single deity? At the foot of Mount Sinai, the narrative claims a spectacular event occurred, the delivery of the Ten Commandments. This momentous occasion codified a legal and moral framework, forging a disparate group of refugees into a nation bound by divine law. Was the format of this supposedly divine law entirely unique to the Israelites, or did it borrow heavily from the surrounding pagan cultures of the ancient Near East? Surprisingly, the Mosaic covenant is structured almost exactly like ancient Hittite suzerainty treaties. It brilliantly mirrored the political documents used by regional kings to establish loyalty with vassal states, using familiar, earthly legal language for an unprecedented divine purpose. Did the early Israelites immediately practice exclusive devotion to this single, jealous God? Or is the traditional story of instant, unwavering monotheism a later historical revision? Ancient archaeological shards reveal a shocking truth. Early Israelites practiced monolatry. They worshipped Yahweh as their primary deity, but inscriptions clearly show they also acknowledged and actively worshipped a female consort named Asherah alongside him. When did this exclusive, uncompromising monotheism finally crystallize? What devastating event forced the Israelites to abandon all other gods and focus solely on one universal creator? It wasn't an instant revelation, but the direct result of the devastating Babylonian exile in 587 BCE. Stripped of their homeland and their sacred temple, the Israelites had to radically redefine their God, not as a local deity, but as the universal sovereign. How did the Israelites survive without a physical temple or a homeland? When the center of their spiritual universe was burned to the ground, how did the religion avoid extinction? They achieved something unprecedented. They transformed their faith into a portable, text-centered religion. Without a physical altar for sacrifices, the written word and communal study became the new sanctuary, allowing their unique identity to survive anywhere on earth. What became the foundational core of this new portable faith? As they shifted from animal sacrifice to study, what specific texts anchored their scattered civilization? The Torah was canonized around the 5th century BCE, forming the bedrock of the Tanakh. This Hebrew Bible was carefully divided into 3 distinct sections: the Torah, or law, the Nevi'im, or prophets, and the Ketuvim, encompassing writings and psalms. Were the biblical prophets merely enforcers of strict religious rituals? Did they roam the ancient world demanding blind obedience to the newly codified laws of the Torah? Far from it. The biblical prophets functioned essentially as ancient social justice activists. They boldly challenged the elite, speaking truth to power and demanding that society care for the marginalized, the widow, and the orphan above all else. Did the prophets believe that rituals, burnt offerings, and sacrifices were the ultimate key to pleasing the Creator and securing divine favor?
They vehemently rejected this idea. The prophets emphasized moral action and social justice over ritual sacrifice. They declared that God despised empty religious festivals and hollow prayers,
if they were accompanied by the oppression of the poor and vulnerable.
How did ordinary people express their relationship with this demanding deity? When faced with tragedy, war, or despair, how did the ancient Israelites communicate with a universal God?
Through the Psalms, the ancient Israelites stripped away God's cosmic grandeur. These poetic writings focused entirely on raw human experiences, giving voice to deep depression, burning anger, profound doubt, and ecstatic joy directly in the face of the divine.
Was it permissible to openly question or challenge the Creator? In a world where kings demanded absolute submission, would God tolerate defiance from mere mortals?
Yes, and it was modeled by the patriarch himself. In Genesis, Abraham famously challenges God's justice regarding the destruction of Sodom, demanding, "Shall not the judge of all the earth do right?" Doubt and moral challenge became holy acts.
What does the very name of the chosen people imply about their faith? If challenging God is permitted, how is that reflected in their core identity? The name Israel literally translates to one who wrestles with God. Unlike faiths that demand absolute submission, Judaism is built on the concept that wrestling, fighting, and arguing with the divine is the highest, most authentic form of spiritual engagement.
How does this culture of wrestling with the divine view the inherent nature of humanity? Are humans born broken, burdened by the sins of their ancestors? It fundamentally rejects the concept of original sin. Humanity is not viewed as inherently broken or cursed from birth. Instead, humans possess both good and evil inclinations, endowed with the profound responsibility of free will to choose their path. Without original sin to escape, what is the ultimate goal of the faith? If salvation from hell isn't the primary objective, what are they striving for? The ultimate directive of the Torah isn't about securing a place in the afterlife. Judaism heavily prioritizes olam hazeh, this current world. The primary command is simply to choose life in the present, focusing entirely on earthly actions rather than heavenly rewards.
Does the faith rely on a divine Savior to descend from the heavens and magically fix the world's suffering and injustice?
No. It anticipates a strictly human Messiah, a mortal leader, not a divine being. This figure is expected to bring about an era of global peace and justice through earthly leadership, diplomacy, and wisdom, not through supernatural salvation.
How are ordinary people supposed to fix a broken world? Without a divine savior doing the work for them, what is the practical mechanism for global change?
By prioritizing deed over creed. What you believe in your heart is far less important than how you act with your hands. The focus is on tangible, ethical actions designed to achieve tikkun olam, the active, ongoing repair of a shattered world through justice.
How do they decide what is right when human interpretations inevitably clash? Who holds the ultimate authority to define the law when the temple is gone? The catastrophic destruction of the temples birthed a culture of deep intellectualism. Rabbis gathered to debate every facet of the law, recording their conflicting arguments in the Talmud. This created a tradition where questioning the text was as sacred as the text itself. What happens when earthly logic directly contradicts heavenly signs? If the law is debated by men, what occurs when God himself tries to intervene in the argument? In the famous Talmudic story of the oven of Aknai, rabbis are locked in a fierce legal debate. When one rabbi calls upon miracles, and eventually a direct voice from heaven, to prove his interpretation is right, the majority boldly refuses to listen.
Can mortal scholars truly overrule a direct voice from God? Isn't ignoring a heavenly decree the ultimate act of heresy?
They did exactly that. The rabbis established that human interpretation, achieved through majority rule and rigorous earthly debate, supersedes even divine intervention. They claimed God gave them the law at Sinai, and now it was theirs to interpret, not his. How does the Almighty react to being overruled by his own creations? Does he strike them down with lightning for their insolence and pride?
In one of the most surprising texts in religious history, the Talmud records that God responds by laughing with joy, declaring, "My children have defeated me." This perfectly encapsulates Judaism, a faith not of blind submission, but of sacred defiance, rigorous questioning, and earthly action.
How does this ancient legacy of sacred defiance shape our world today?
What happens to a civilization that views arguing with God as the highest form of devotion?
By viewing doubt as a holy act, this tradition birthed a culture of intellectualism that profoundly shaped modern law, science, and human rights. It leaves us with an eternal covenant that demands we don't just wait for salvation, but actively build it.
We started by asking, the eternal covenant, decoding the foundations of faith. And the answer? In one of the most surprising texts in religious history, the Talmud records a debate where rabbis actively overrule a divine voice from heaven, and God responds by laughing with joy, declaring, "My children have defeated me." This perfectly encapsulates Judaism, a faith not of blind submission, but of sacred defiance, rigorous questioning, and earthly action. This documentary traces the evolution of Judaism from ancient polytheism to a portable, text-centered religion, exploring how the catastrophic destruction of its temples birthed a culture of intellectualism that profoundly shaped the modern world. If this changed how you see things, share it with someone who needs to hear it.